One thing you start to see in a lot of this stuff is it's all about patterns. And you see the pattern again and again. So what is the process in new product development? Well, first I have a concept for a product and I have a hypothesis. And then I have to go out and test it. Then I develop the product. Then I introduce it to the market. And then I have to manage it through its life cycle from introduction to when you finally have to kill it. And so that's what they refer to as cradle to grave. And these are the steps that a product goes through. Now, one thing you notice is that profit declines over time. And the reason why is when you're selling like hotcakes, that's when you make your maximum profit. What ends up happening is when you get towards the end, what happens when you have an old product? Well, people expect you to start cutting price on it and things like that because now you're starting to become a commodity once you get into decline. So this is what the curves look like. So the things you need to look at is you need to look at other factors when you release your product. Like, is it compatible with what's going on there? Is it a product that you can actually communicate to others? What's the cost benefit to the customer? And trialability is really, really important because if you believe you have a good product, if somebody tries it who's interested, they're going to buy it. And this is why the trial step, like for example, going from awareness to interest for your product, right now it's like around 3%. On the other hand, or 2 to 3%. On the other hand, once you get to trial, now the expectation is that your acceptance rate is going to be in the neighborhood of 30 to 50%. And an example of that is food. Why do you think they give out free samples? Because they try it and they believe you have a good chunk of food. Then they're going to buy it. Now, there's something called the coefficient of innovation and the coefficient of imitation. And what that affects is my curves have two shapes. They go left and right, meaning in time. Does it happen earlier? Does it happen later? And then there's the magnitude, up and down, meaning how spiky does it get. And so when you have a lot of when you have a lot of innovation, then your curve moves to the left, and that means it gets adopted much more quickly because you have something really interesting that people want to look at. On the other hand, if it's something just another Me Too product, then it tends to get adopted a lot more slowly. When you have imitation, what happens is that when you have a lot of imitation, people think it's something new, so your curve spikes quickly and then it dies off in a hurry because then they realize it's something really not all that new. You're just knocking off something else. And that's actually a halfway feasible strategy. Some people take advantage of like trendy things or whatever. They come in, make their cash, and they get out. On the other hand, if you have something that's not really an imitation, something that's new, then you get flatness in the curve, meaning it rises up and it stays there for a while. And so coefficient of that's innovation and imitation. How do they affect the curves? Innovation impacts it in time, and imitation affects the magnitude. And gee, every once in a while this ends up on a quiz. Hint, 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 hint. When we think about the life cycle, adopters are two types. They're innovators or they're imitators. And so innovators, those are basically your cult people. Those are basically your early adopters. And what happens is they're critical at first, and then as you go along, they become less important because you're into the early majority and the later majority. Imitators are influenced by frequent buyers, meaning these are the people, hey, they see everybody else buying it, so they want to buy it too. And so this is in the Bass model when we talked about the queue. When you see others using it, then you want to use it. And so here are the adoption curves of a bunch of different products. If you notice, they tend to be very bumpy because that's the way products are really adopted. And why is there that bumpiness? Remember we talked about buckets? that you keep selling to different markets, and so depending on when they come aboard, you get bumpiness. Now, one thing you notice, though, in a lot of the tech products is what you see is a lot of flatness in the middle. That's the chasm. And so this is why these curves are shaped the way they are. I have my hypothesis and all. Now I need to go test market it and see if there's interest in my product. And so some of the challenges in trying to test market things is my competition might release something right in the middle of my test marketing. That's a problem. I have to check behaviors as well as sales. And that's, how are people acting towards my product? Meaning I might have a lot of sales, but on the other hand, if people aren't like referring me, if they don't have that behavior or whatever, then I'm going to be pretty short-lived. You have to look at biases. You have to look, like, for example, what if it turns out that all my sales are coming from a very small group and that I haven't expanded into a wide demographic? Then that means that bucket can quickly hurry up and get saturated, and I'm not going to get sales. Am I going to tip off competitors? If I'm test marketing, somebody gets wind of it and they tell somebody else. That's one thing about Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is the most gossipy place on earth. It's actually pretty funny. There was a guy I saw once. I was getting off an airplane and he intentionally sat in the back and he waited. And then he went up every aisle, seeing if anybody had left any paperwork or anything behind, some kind of intelligence. And it was kind of funny to watch. But anyway, that's the Valley. The thing is, everybody knows everything about everybody else. It's 24/7 business. Anyway, and when you test market, do you leave yourself enough time to see the response? Like, should I wait a week to see how these promotions are working? Should I wait 2 weeks? You have to leave yourself enough time. Now, new product development, you have to think about how far do you want to carry it before you finally admit to yourself, hey, look, this isn't going to work. And so this puts a pressure on you. If you're wrong, what kind of mistake do you want to make? Do you want to make a mistake like we released it and we wasted a lot of money and there was no market there? Or do we want to go in the opposite direction and not release it, but then somebody else jumps in and takes advantage of it? And that's what type 1 and type 2 type failures are, false positives and false negatives. And so this is one of your big challenges as being first mover. Now, if you have a truly great product and you're first mover, do you wait and let for someone else to go through the door? Or do you do it first? And the key is that if you're early to market, find a niche market where you can make money and keep your head afloat. And that's what I refer to as the bunker. The thing is, a lot of startups get killed because they think they're ready to scale and they spend a lot of money scaling up and it isn't there. So what you do is take your time, incubate, and then sit in your bunker and wait for the opportunity to arrive. The best example of that is actually Microsoft. When Windows, Software Arts released Windows first, and guess what? There wasn't enough RAM, there wasn't enough processor speed. So they would like click on the file and sit there and wait like 2 minutes for the file to open up. And it was just horribly slow. Bill Gates, early on, what did they do? They sold a basic compiler for an Altair computer. What the hell is that? But Bill Gates waited. That Altair compiler, basic compiler, made him $7 million. They basically treaded water doing that. And then what happened? They then released DOS to IBM. But Bill Gates knew DOS was also a stepping stone. And so they treaded water, treaded water, treaded water. Now the first Windows that released was 3.1. How many failures did they have before that? I think there was like a 2.11 or something like that. But the point is that they didn't release until they were ready. And so that's the thing. Find a good market where you can make money, tread water, break even, and then you go for it. Now, with your product, should I take this time out for all this testing, or should I just go for it? And the reason why you do the testing is because it gets very, very expensive if you don't. The VW Bug, they test marketed it before they re-released it. Instagram tested. E.T. test audiences before they released that movie. PS3, they test marketed it. Oh, and then there's the Samsung Galaxy. Yeah, that crashed and burned. Literally. So this is why you do all your pre-testing. Just because launching gets very, very expensive. The tools that we've learned so far in marketing also apply to product development, meaning we segment, we figure out which features we want to use. We use conjoint to figure out which features work and don't work. And then we use analogy and compare it to other products to see if it will work. And so conjoint is an extremely powerful way to figure out product features. We could do modeling using part words. We can estimate how much the customer actually likes our product, and so we can validate our models through testing. The thing about price, you have to be careful because price can skew your results. And that's where, if you just come flat out and say, would you pay this much for it? It's like, of course they're going to say no, or of course they're going to want to. The thing about price is it's perception, right? In order to have perception, perception has to have a reference. And that's the challenge of using price. I want to find out about price, but you can't ask for it directly. And I'll show you the techniques of how to make that work. Segmentation, we use exactly the same tools, whether it's trees, maps, or whatever. And so when I have 27 combinations, like I can't test for 27 combinations. So I have to figure out which cases make the most sense. And this is where I need to go out and use levels again. Essentially, we're going to use the same concepts as we use for DOE. And so I'll go through this process more in the next video.